Join me as I start working on my cross-stitch project named The Lion's Family by Anchor Design Studio. Let me show you how to start a cross-stitch project. So first off, we have to secure all the materials needed as indicated on our chart. So it will give you the thread needed and the meter length per thread. Also, it will give you the materials required, how to do the stitches or the needed stitches. If you open it, you'll have the entire design that you will stitch. So what are the materials you need to work on a cross-stitch project? Of course, we have to prepare our cloth. So a cloth can be an Aida or linen. What is commonly used in the Philippines is an Aida cloth, which has count 16. It has a bigger square compared to count 14, and it comes in different colors. We have white, cream, black, even blue or green, I think. But what I have used so far is white and cream. Another material that we need is, of course, our thread. Our thread is also called a skein. One of this is called a skein, and each strand of this from a skein has like six strand of thread bundled into one. And if you look at our pattern, it will show you how many strands of a certain color you need for your pattern. So for example, strand number 435, I have to use 3 strands. Three strands for this thread in my pattern, which is tagged as a box with a dot. And when you buy your thread, make sure that you see to it has an ample length needed for your design. So in this pattern, it will indicate that I need to have 23 meter lengths of thread number 435, and one skein has 8 meters length of thread. So if I need to have 23 meters of this thread number in my design, then of course I need to have at least 4 skeins to have an ample length of this number, thread number. There are thread that is used with 2 strands only. There are some 1 strand, and the rest back stitches. So that we have to know too. Also, my pattern indicates an anchor shade number, but anchor shades are no longer sold in my preferred store. So what they do is they converted it to DMC shade numbers. So they have what we call the anchor to DMC floss conversion chart, wherein it will show you the anchor number and its equivalent DMC thread number. So when I bought these threads, they gave me automatically the DMC equivalent thread number. Once we have our thread, then of course we have to have our pins and needles. Yeah, you can have pins and needles, and some will also secure a pin holder. What I have is a simple handmade pin holder. I can see online that there are like metal needle holder, magnetic needle holder, wherein you'll just place your needle, and it comes with colorful and beautiful designs, so you can have that too. Another is highlighter, because this is used to highlight what you've finished on the pattern. Of course, your scissor. You can opt to have a ruler. There are also thread remover in case you're mistaken or you've mistakenly stitched a certain portion of your pattern. You can also have an embroidery hook to secure your cloth, your Ida cloth. For some, you can buy these materials in a package wherein you'll have them all: the thread, the needle, the cloth, all the things that you need. It comes in a kit. Second step is to prepare our cloth. So if you notice, edges of the Ida cloth, once it's cut, it frays like this. So to avoid further fraying, some would bind the edges with a zigzag stitch. Back in my day, when I was in high school, the easiest way to avoid further fraying to place a masking tape. So place a masking tape all around the cloth. Now that we have prepared our Ida cloth, we are ready to go through our cross-stitch chart. On the cross-stitch chart, it gives you boxes with symbols. Symbols in the legend tell you what colors to use and where they go. My Keto diagram mentioned that a square with a red circle indicates thread number 733. So, when I look at my chart, this will instruct me to choose number 733 thread with 3 strands and where I will start stitching with such thread number. So on the chart, it shows how many boxes I have to stitch for this specific thread numbers. Once we understand the concept of your cross-stitch chart, and before you even start stitching, we have to find the center of your fabric. Why it has to be the center? It's because we have to ensure that you occupy a certain portion of your fabric and not to be on the edge once you're done. Why not to be on the edge? Because you will be having difficulty in framing your project. Imagine if you are at the edge already, if you started at the edge with only 3 boxes left before framing, that would be difficult. It's difficult to adjust, and of course, for you, it's also difficult to stitch right really at the edge of your fabric. Okay, so what I did, I crossed the fabric lengthwise and crosswise. So once I folded it lengthwise and crosswise, I can now see that the center of the fabric is right here. So instead of doing a basting stitches, I drew a line from the one I folded and identified the intersection where the 2 lines met. Place the pin and identify that that is my center. And that is where I need to start my stitching. So once I identified the center of my fabric, I can now decide which color I should start stitching. When I say color, the thread that I'll be using to start my project. Now that you're ready to stitch, let's prepare our thread. So from the skein, what you'll do is get a certain length of the thread. In my case, I use at least an arm length of the thread. So after getting an arm length of the thread, then you get 3 strands of the thread. So all you have to do is separate those 3 and pull it up, making sure that you'll not tangle the rest of the thread. So once you have it, you have those 3 strands, you're now ready to insert the thread on the needle. So thread your needle just like in hand sewing, but do not make a knot at the end of the strand. This is to avoid lumping at the back of your fabric once you're done. So what I do is I simply put my needle at the back, just like what I'm showing you now, and then you can start stitching. So generally we can start stitching in a row, but what I use is to work per color that I have. So in this case, that's thread number 911. I work on it per square that has this color up until I used up the entire thread. In that way, I will not repeatedly cut my thread and start with another color. So I finish the entire 6 strands of thread and start with another set, probably of the same pattern or same symbol, or I can also opt to go or to jump to another symbol. In stitching, you can do a half cross stitch first for the entire row, or you can also go with the entire cross stitching all the way through. Now that we're done with the cross stitches, it's time to lock our thread. So keep stitching until we reach the end of the thread or until we run out of stitches in the pattern. So on the back side of the fabric, pass the needle under at least 3 completed stitches. For me, I only use at least 1 completed stitches to secure the thread. Then trim the remaining thread. Be careful not to cut the rest of the stitches at the back of your pattern. So to sum it up, how do we start with our cross stitch project? Of course, first we secure all the materials: the thread, the needle, your cloth, your Aida cloth. Follow the ones indicated on your pattern or on your key diagram. Secure all the necessary thread, the length that you need for those thread. Second is we prepare our fabric. So we either place a masking tape right around the fabric to avoid fraying of our fabric, or you can do zigzag stitches. Third is we have to find the center of our cloth or our fabric. So in finding the center of our fabric, do the lengthwise and crosswise folding. Drew a line on the fabric. You can put a pin on it or put the needle on the center. Then you can start stitching right at the portion of that fabric. Then lastly, we can now start our cross stitch. So we either do it per half cross stitch, go back to complete the cross stitch, or you can do it all at once, do the entire cross stitch for an entire row, or you can opt to go with per color stitching. Of course, we have to lock the thread at the back of the needle and make sure to avoid knotting the thread towards the tip to avoid lumping once your project is done. So cross stitching should be a stress reliever. Work your way in finishing your project. Do not be so stressed out that you're far behind in finishing your project. Work at your own pace. Enjoy the process. And of course, work while you're work while you are wide awake, because it's difficult if you make a mistake, like if you stitch an entire row and you have to unwound all of it, remove all the stitches, and start all over again. So it's more of a quality of what you're stitching rather than running for a particular deadline to finish a specific part of your pattern, right? So enjoy stitching!